Okay, I want to talk a little bit about an incident that occurred during a recess in a congressional hearing today on overreach of essentially lawfare and judicial and law enforcement overreach pertaining to January 6th and how Smith had violated people's privacy with they're not wiretaps, they're phone records of phone calls, what we used to refer to as a pen register. This incident that occurred was between a right-wing pundit and a retired Capitol Hill police officer by the last name of Fannin, Fannon. Officer Fannin was greeted sarcastically by this conservative pundit. He acted out. He acted aggressively towards this guy. Now, I want to get into some stuff about Officer Fannin. He was hurt very badly by people on January 6th. He sustained injuries that caused him to retire from law enforcement. Injuries and PTSD. I will not justify or condone what people did that day. I've seen the video, but I've seen the entire unabridged video, and what I saw of Officer Fannin that day, he would have probably been brought up on charges within his department if he was in any other law enforcement agency in this country. Fannin, when people deal with fear different ways, and most people who are in the military and in law enforcement, they're tempered to manage their fears and fall back on their training. A lot of these Capitol Hill officers were not hired because of their prowess as law enforcement officers. They're mostly patron hires. Their training is very limited. There's been a number of incidents that indicate that, and they were ill prepared, if prepared at all, to deal with the occurrence of January 6th. They just weren't. On January 6th, Officer Fannin acted very aggressively, and his aggression was predicated on fear. I've seen fear in people's eyes before, and I've seen the aggression, the physical and verbal aggression that he displayed on January 6th it manifested today in the hearing room. What I'm saying is, this guy does not know how to deal with his fears. And because you can see the fear in his eyes, I'm pretty sure this pundit knew about his hair trigger aggression and said what he did, which was just a sarcastic greeting to trigger him. And like I said, it's predicated on fear. Do I criticize this officer for being afraid that day? Absolutely not. I believe most officers had some level of fear within them that day. What I have an issue with is if a person has, I had fear in incidents that I faced, and when I was a law enforcement officer, and I pretty much can say it on one, maybe two of those instances, I overreacted, but not to the level of Officer Fannon's overreaction. I don't want to say he was asking for it, but he definitely was provocative to have sustained what happened to him. I don't want to say it like it's his fault or he deserved it. No. But how his actions based on his fear is what caused the aggression, and thus the assault that had happened to him. Do I say he's a bad person? No, absolutely not. He was just not cut out to be a cop. I'm willing to bet he tried to be in regular law enforcement for some time, and probably in the psych evaluations probably saw, that he wasn't cut out for it, and didn't get the job, and then a relative of his probably stepped in and said, hey, I could get you on the Capitol Police Department, because maybe one of his relatives was a congressman or something, and he got on that job. Now, this criticism is not so much towards him, but the DC Capitol Police Department. And the reason I'm saying this is you can tell a lot of what happened that day and the actions of those officers was predicated on fear, and that fear reaction caused aggression that was like pouring gas on the fire. You had angry people being confronted by law enforcement that was not ready for something like this. Some officers just stood still, didn't want to get involved. You've seen videos of them standing at doors. And then you've seen officers like Officer Fann. Like I said, he was afraid. Another officer that acted in fear was Lieutenant Michael Byrd. And Lieutenant Michael Byrd, who really didn't belong in law enforcement at all, he just shouldn't have been. But nepotism and politics kept him on that job. Lieutenant Byrd shot through a 1 foot by 1 foot window in a heavy door that was chained shut, and he shot blindly and in fear. And when he did that, he struck and killed Ashley Babbitt. And this is, like what I said, the training and the fear of these officers. Officer Byrd, Lieutenant Byrd, he, months before January 6th, left his firearm and his handcuffs and keys in a public washroom. Any kind of instance that would occur, the officer would have been fired. In any regular police department, but because he was in this department that has the politics and the nepotism. Also, The politicians have to act in their own interest, because a lot of these officers have seen and heard things that these congressmen and senators not necessarily would want to become public. And if they were to take disciplinary action or termination of that said officer, they could respond in that manner, that they could leak stuff that those lawmakers would not necessarily want to become public. So this is why Michael Byrd kept his job. Not only kept his job, kept his rank as lieutenant. After Ashley Babbitt was murdered, well, I wouldn't call it, not necessarily, because there was really no premeditation. You could consider this second-degree murder, or maybe manslaughter. But, see, I'm trying to actually give these people the benefit of the doubt. I'm trying to be kind to them. Byrd shouldn't have been in uniform that day. He shouldn't have been in the department that day because of this prior incident. Byrd fired in fear, just like the aggression manifested by Fannin. And like I said, I seen Fannin's eyes. I seen the video. I seen the entire video, and not just his beatdown. And his beatdown was awful. I have no doubt that he sustained the injuries and and he deserves to be retired. And I think, like I said, I don't think he should have been in law enforcement. I'm glad he's not in law enforcement anymore. Not that I'm saying that I'm glad he was hurt, just that he could have hurt somebody with that kind of fear reflex. Now, and like I said, this is consistent. The Michael Byrd, Officer Fannin, because a Capitol Hill police officer a few years back shot and killed a woman during a training session that they were doing in a library. I think it was a legal library that the lawmakers had access to. So they were using this library for training. And he shot and killed a woman. First of all, did you have live ammunition? This is something to be addressed by the leadership, by the chiefs and the senior officers, and even the Congressional Sergeant at Arms, because he's above them, should have been addressed, that you shouldn't be using live ammunition during a training exercise unless you are something like special forces. But anyways, he should have had something inert in his magazine, or a plastic firearm. I did training with those when I was in law enforcement. He should not have been trained, but he ended up becoming a scapegoat for his superiors, because he was charged and convicted of manslaughter and sentenced to 12 years in prison. So what I'm saying about this particular law enforcement agency is very much a consistent issue. That like I said, these people were that way. I also want to get to an issue with an officer that testified, or I should say testified, in front of Congress and under oath, and did the same thing at the 9/11 Commission. The name of this officer escapes me. He's African American. He was amongst several officers to testify. Officer Fannin, I believe, was one of those officers as well. But this officer testified that he was at a specific location in the midst of the confrontation. He testified that but video from that day contradicts it, because instead of being where he testified he was at, he was in fact amongst several officers who were escorting congressional leadership persons, including the Speaker of the House, through a tunnel underneath the Capitol that leads to, I'm not sure, there's a couple of tunnels. I believe this one led to the Rayburn office, Congressional office building, which is about 2 blocks from the Capitol itself. But that's where he was, along with congressional leadership, whose office, like the Speaker's office, is actually in the Capitol, but most congressmen, they have offices in other buildings adjacent to nearby the Capitol. So this video evidence showed he was not where he was. He was never charged with lying to Congress or perjury or anything else. It was just ignored as if he didn't do it. These are what I speak at. Why I speak of the Capitol Hill police are essentially mall cops. That's what they do. Do I say they should be treated disrespectfully? Because no. But and also I don't say that all of the the DC cops, the Capitol Police officers are this way. I'm sure there are professional law enforcement officers within the department. I also am saying that there's a lot of patronage in law enforcement. People, I know I missed out on some jobs over patronage. But this is what the main body of the uniform division of the Capitol Police Department is. And they've been able to get away with that for a long time until January 6th came along. And the reason I'm bringing all this up, not just because of the incident, but because of recent claims that DHS is hiring a lot of officers that are not trained or poorly trained. And this couldn't be further from the truth. The people, I know some people who recently became officers with ICE and HSI, Homeland Security Investigations. These officers are retired from other police departments. They've had years of experience, some of them decades of experience. And these officers either retired early or just walked away from the job like I did because of stressors. I had 3 friends that committed suicide. And my wife was pregnant, and I just didn't want it anymore. So, like I said, there were a lot of officers after the 2000 Summer of Love that walked away from the job. And they saw the opportunity to do something they believed in as law enforcement officers, and that was removing violent offenders from communities here in the United States. So these are already trained officers. Because of their experience and the need to get them out in the field, they had an abridged form of training that was much quicker so that they could get them out in the field. So to say that these officers, these agents, were not properly trained is not true. They use the fact that they have a shortened, abbreviated training regiment when they were hired. But like I said, that was predicated on years and decades of pre-existing experience. So this is just part of the narrative involving the legitimacy of these agents being employed. They said that the officer that shot and killed Renee Good was not properly trained, yet he had decades of experience both with CBP and ICE. So that assertion is just flat out wrong. They are saying that these untrained officers are very violent. They are meeting, I feel and I believe that they are showing remarkable restraint. Seeing what I'm seeing on videos, a lot of what you see on the internet is, like I said, abbreviated and abridged. They'll show the confrontation with the law enforcement officers. They won't show what led up to the confrontation with the law enforcement officers, that they were being assaulted, that they were not acting in a provocative nature, that they were having containers of urine, frozen water bottles, frozen pigs' feet, and pig snouts thrown at them. That's another thing that the media doesn't tell you about. They use this irony because ice and pigs. So the rocks thrown at them. The fireworks. The media says they are fireworks. What they are is a firework used in the process of an improvised explosive device. The pressure cooker bombs, the propellant, the explosive that causes the explosion, that in the Boston Marathon incident, that explosion came from fireworks that were dismantled and used as the explosive for the bomb. Bottle rockets, stuff like that. They were put in the pressure cooker, and then of course the detonation under pressure causes the expansion, it amplifies the expansion of the gas, which propels the items, the projectiles that are in the explosive device. And what these fireworks that are being thrown into the officer's perimeter are wrapped in, but my words are failing me a little bit, partly because of my brain injury from my falling in 2013. These fireworks are turned into an improvised explosive by putting a sticky substance like axle grease on the firework and then rolling these grease-covered fireworks in BBs, like ball bearings or BBs from a BB gun. And then they wrap them in cellophane or duct tape. And what they do, the reason they do that is it compresses the explosive, so when it expands, it propels things out in a much more violent manner. And a lot of police officers have been seriously hurt by these improvised explosive devices. They will use water balloon slingshots. They could shoot these things over a block away with these things. Two people hold the ends, and then the other person pulls it back, puts the IED in where they would put a water balloon, and then they launch it, and it will go easily a block into their perimeter and detonate. These are the kind of tactics they use. Officers during these type of riots have been assaulted with, like, I don't know if you've seen the video of the people that ran into the U-Haul back in 2020. They'll come out with signs, and they'll come out with other things. They'll come out with projectiles like bricks that they would throw at people and water bottles and all this stuff. But a lot of them you'll see carrying signs, and what you don't realize is these signs are mounted on pieces of wood that are cut on a bias. They're cut on an angle. So they can remove the sign, and now this handle for the sign becomes a spear. And they do this with wood. They also do this with PVC pipe. So these officers can now be stabbed with an edged weapon. Or they could use the handle for blunt force trauma, hitting the officers. So this is, once the sun goes down, these things are transformed into what they are. This is what I'm I'm getting to. Officers are being assaulted. Officers were assaulted on January 6th. I'm not denying that. What I'm emphasizing here is how officers react when they're properly trained, which Capitol Hill police officers weren't, and I still believe they're not. And the level of training that DHS officers and CBP and U.S. Marshals, I've seen the training that U.S. Marshals go through because I applied for a job as a U.S. Marshal back in the 1990s. And man, there was no way I could have passed the rigorous physical training that U.S. Marshals go through. I have a lot of respect for U.S. Marshals. Same thing with the FBI. They go through a rigorous training at the academy in Quantico. I believe the Marshals Academy is in Albuquerque, New Mexico. I'm not entirely certain of that. There's something that makes me think that the Marshals training facility is in Albuquerque. I could be wrong about that one. I'm just throwing that out there that I believe that what is, or maybe one of their training facilities is in Albuquerque. Would not be surprised if they also use the FBI Academy's facility in Quantico. So this is the point I'm trying to make. You have January 6th, you had officers that were not supposed to be, ill-fitted to cope with this thing. The National Guard should have been there. Big ball drop. There's a number of people who could actually request for the deployment for the National Guard, the DC National Guard. The DC National Guard can be activated by the President of the United States, the Vice President of the United States, depending on the circumstances, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives, depending on the circumstances. If there was a legitimate threat to the Capitol, and there was that day, I'm not going to deny that, they would, the Speaker of the House could very quickly mobilize the National Guard, and it wouldn't be federalized like the president if he initiated it, but they would be out there at the Capitol if the Capitol was at risk. And another person who could activate the DC National Guard is the mayor of the city of Washington. So there's a number of people who could have activated the Guard. earlier before that would have most likely avoided the entire thing from January 6th from happening. And they didn't. And that includes President Trump. I love President Trump to death, but he makes mistakes just like everybody else. But he did not provoke this. If you watch the speech, the entire speech, and not the AI editing job that CBS and BBC did, changing the order of things that he said to fit their narrative. And then there's other instances where law enforcement should have been brought out in the Capitol in 2020, because there was an insurrection in May of 2020 regarding the BLM riots, and the White House was literally under siege. They had they had an inner and outer perimeter where they put this fencing that is resistant to scaling around the White House, and that perimeter and the inner perimeter were breached by these rioters. They would make like human pyramids or human ladders that people could climb up and go over these fences that are, I believe, it's somewhere only 12 feet tall, and then go over the other fence. And these people that breached this outer perimeter would be then met by the uniformed Secret Service and United States Marines. And a number of people got arrested that night. A number of Secret Service agents and Marines got injured in this conflict. And the Secret Service had to move the entire first family from the residence that night down to the PIOC under the East Wing of the White House. And the PIOC is the Presidential Emergency Operations Center. It's the bomb shelter that was built for FDR. So this comes to the threat level and the training of the officers. They had, on those nights and a lot of those riots, that was the same night that they set the church across the street from the White House on fire. The level of training that these officers had on that night was very good training. However, they had insufficient numbers. They were overwhelmed. The White House was under siege that night. There were two nights like that happened, but that was the worst one. The White House was under siege the night the president accepted the nomination. I believe that was in August. But this particular incident happened prior to the president accepting. This happened in May of 2020, and it was very bad. And the guards should have been out that night. The guards should have been out around the country, the different state National Guards, because this is why we had the Summer of Love, because politicians, Waltz should have had the National Guard deployed much sooner than what they did. When they did, the 3rd precinct wouldn't have fell. The officers that attacked, hundreds of officers had to respond to the 3rd district police station so that they could safely evacuate the officers that were trapped in the precinct. And then subsequently to that, the building was burnt to the ground. It was never replaced. So this is, in closing, like I said, this is what the real story is about Jan 6th, about the training of the officers that are involved. Oh, another thing that comes out, and this will be my last issue, the talking points regarding CBP and ICE is that these people are being arrested without due process. They are being arrested without a warrant. and they are breaking into the house without a warrant. The due process complaint is specious at best, because these people that have a permanent removal order that has been, there's an issuing authority involved. The person who issues this removal order is a judge an administrative judge in the immigration court. In other words, this has been ruled on, due process has been completed, and this person is to be removed from the country. And a removal order and a detention order are administrative warrants. So an officer has the authority to make the arrest based on the administrative warrant. They also have the authority to use force to make the arrest, and they can execute a forced entry to secure the arrest of the individual. None of this is the narrative is just off. It doesn't, their talking points are freaking fiction. Furthermore, I know this is a long video. It's almost 40 minutes. It's going to be 40 minutes, so I'm not going to get a lot of viewers. Furthermore, the officers that were involved in making the arrest, any law enforcement officer can make an arrest without a warrant if the crime that occurred was in their presence, and they and other law enforcement officers witnessed the offense. This is why ICE and other officers can arrest or detain these rioters. If they commit assault against officers, they can arrest them without a warrant. And that was what was occurring when Renee Good was killed. The officers that came to the door of her vehicle, their probable cause to come to their vehicle was her interfering with arrest of these illegal aliens. What they were doing was being an accessory after the fact of the crimes that these illegal aliens committed, and they could face time for that. And being an accessory after the fact, you can go to prison for the same penalty as the individual. So if the individual was a rapist, you could go to prison as an accessory to that rape. You could go to if manslaughter, you could go as an accessory to the manslaughter. But that is not, basically not, they're not pursuing this, and it would be a big hurdle to get over if they did. I would like them to at least try a few of them, because that would definitely be a fuck around and find out moment for them, because if if a few people went to prison, that would most likely stop what's going on, or certainly lower the temperature. Sorry, I'm running out of ammunition here. And like I said, it's almost 40 minutes. So, the officers are arresting and detaining these people for interfering as opposed to being an accessory. And Renee Good, if you've seen the entirety of the videos, which you don't, the media doesn't show them, she had been for over an hour harassing the officers, blocking intersections, And just prior to the incident when she lost her life, she drove down a street and caused 2 ICE agents to jump out of the way. Because if they wouldn't have jumped out of the way, she would have fucking hit them. I'm sorry about my language there, but she would have hit them. Definitely would have hit them. And what those agents were doing was trying to dislodge one of their vehicles from a snow pile. If you heard early versions of what occurred, that's the snow pile talk that Christine Nome and another number of other agents were talking about. This is why they were trying to take Renee Good into custody. She was not, according to the mayor, attempting to make a 3-point turn, because ring cam video showed that she was blocking this street for 5 minutes. So the agents exercised restraint, but finally she pushed it too far, and they went to take her into custody. The one officer, the primary officer, was trying to open the door and extricate her from the vehicle when she put it in reverse, attempting to evade being arrested. Then put it into drive, and her girlfriend, or whatever she is, wife, encouraged her, go, 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 go. You hear this on the video. And when she went to pull away, the video clearly shows that the officer was struck by the vehicle, and when you had sufficient probable cause to use deadly force, he shot her. He shot 1 round through the windshield and 1 round through the passenger side door. I've seen pictures online of he got one, either the first or second shot got her in the temple. She was most likely dead as her vehicle careened out of control, and she most certainly was dead when the officers responded to render aid. The officer that just got struck by the vehicle ran to render aid to this woman. So I believe 4 agents ran to render aid to this woman. So, and unfortunately, she was gone. It's a tragedy that anybody gets killed like this. I mean, but his actions were most certainly justified. And that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe. God bless. Hang loose.